KoitCast.
Today's guest is an American author with a PhD in physiology. She's also worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Aerospace Center in satellite photography. She served on the MUFON Board of Directors for 7 years from 1993 and is a consultant in both physiology and astronomy, as well as a field investigator. Please give a massive Koit welcome to Irena McCammon Scott. Hi Irena, and welcome to KoitCast.
Thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here.
No problem. It's an honour to have you here, so thank you for coming. Let's give the audience a grounding of who you are. So from your perspective, who are you, where you're from, etc.?
Well, I'm from the U.S., sort of the middle of the U.S. in Ohio, which is actually a border state. It borders on Canada and a coastal state on Lake Erie, so it's not as boring as a typical Midwest state. But anyway, my background is in science. I have a PhD from College of Veterinary Medicine. I was a professor and worked on grants and different things. I had tried to get into astronomy when I was young, and they didn't hire females, but I had wound up in the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and then at the Defense Intelligence Agency as a GS-11. And part of my position there was working with satellite photography and identifying airplanes on that. And so I've also worked at Battelle Memorial Institute, which did a study on UFOs. And I've also been at Wright-Patterson. I didn't work there, but I was sent for work-related conferences and things. And so I've been in the secured area there.
Very varied then.
Mm-hmm.
Very varied. The veterinary was literally a veterinarian side of things. Was that what it was, to do with animals, or are we talking the vets in relation to army veterans?
Yeah, in relation to animals.
Animals, good. Okay.
Veterinary, yeah.
Lovely. What made you sort of like stop that then?
What?
What made you not do the veterinarian side of things? What pushed you in other directions?
Well, that's what I did. I started in astronomy and tried to get into that. And every place I went, it was male only, and I wasn't allowed to even apply. And so I was working my way through. And so I had a fellowship to a veterinary school, and so I went there. And then after that, I stayed in kind of that field of biology or physiology or physical chemistry, that sort of thing.
And how long were you doing the veterinarian stuff? I mean, you still doing it to this day? You still got your fingers in the pie, so to speak?
I have it a little bit in the pie. I'm still doing reviews and things like that, and belong to scientific organizations and that sort of thing, peer reviewer and that sort of thing.
It's a shame about the astronomy side of things, isn't it? Because obviously, if today you wanted to go into it, you clearly wouldn't have those obstacles in your way, presumably.
Yeah, I was born way too soon because that's what I really wanted to do, and it was my interest.
Yeah, what was it about the astronomy that really pulled at you to do it?
Oh, I was just interested in everything that was going on in the universe, how the stars developed and how they got planets and how planetary systems developed and different types of stars and the quantum mechanics and everything.
Yeah, so how it works then, essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's, if you don't wonder about that in your early life, about how things work with the universe, there's something awry, because everyone should have that awe and wonder, I think.
Well, I had a lot of that, but it didn't get me into the profession I wanted to get into.
Have you looked at it since?
I take physics courses online still, like relativity and quantum mechanics and that sort of thing, and
Yeah.
reality too.
That's a hard one to get your head around, the whole quantum mechanics things. Do you
It
struggle with that,
certainly
or are you on board with it completely?
Both.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
I mean,
It's
I'm
definitely
trying to
weird.
understand it, but on the other hand, it's not what you'd say common sense.
Yeah.
A lot of things would just make you throw out all the physics you've ever learned and that sort of thing.
Yes, it is very contradictory in some senses. It's very, very hard to get your head around. And I don't even think the people who are leading the edge truly know what it is.
I don't either.
Yeah, it's a very,
I
very,
mean,
very strange one.
they talk about black energy and they say we only the black energy is like 95% of our universe. Well, I bet it's a lot more than that, but that's stuff we don't understand at all.
When you say black energy, is that the what they would call dark matter?
Yeah, dark matter.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah. It's they come up with something to explain something that they don't know about. It's a bit
Yeah,
weird, but I can understand the need for it because you have to
yeah.
sort of like someone try and explain it. Okay, so let's delve into you in relation to the paranormal because obviously that's where this show mainly hits. So, what brought you personally into the paranormal theatre? What was your introduction?
Well, my introduction was is that I was in science my whole life, and so I didn't talk about it when I was in science, but my experience in paranormal started when I was a real young kid. And it was long before we ever heard of UFOs or anything like that. My sister and I were poor, and our family lived on a farm, and we didn't, all we had was a radio, and my parents just played particular stations, so we didn't get a lot of news or anything. And my sister and I slept in an upstairs room then when we were real young kids, and it was an attic room with walls that went up and met in the middle with about 3 feet of space between them. And I just woke up in the middle of the night. It was uh, not storming or anything, and it was summer. And this thing was flying around the room. I didn't know what it was, and it was a little thing, and it looked just like what they call tic tac now.
Oh,
uh, I mean, they're making a lot of that on, those objects are shaped like that. Well, this was really the size of one too. And it was flying around the room. It was lit up. It was dark in the room, and it looked kind of like hot metal or something. And so I just watched it and wondered what it was. And after a while, I noticed it didn't bump into anything. The room was dark, but it was like it could see. And if it came to a wall, it turned and went around furniture and stuff. And so I thought, this is odd. It can see it's in the dark. And it came close to both of us, and it was just kind of browsing around. And the room, um, it had a window on one side that had a screen in it and a door on the other side. So we don't know how it got in there. And I didn't know my sister was awake, but she apparently knew I was. But it flew around, then it flew up toward the ceiling. And when it got to the ceiling, it turned, it went along the ceiling and came to the chandelier in the middle of the ceiling. And it didn't feel its way around or anything. It just seemed to know where everything was. And it started circling the chandelier, not hitting the wall or the chandelier. Then it came down a spiral. And suddenly my sister and I just all of a sudden became absolutely terrified. We started screaming. We ran for the stairs. We were so terrified we fell down the stairs and we couldn't get the door open. We ran to our parents screaming. And they said nothing happened. We just imagined it, which,
the old classic, yeah.
yeah. But there
That
were
is
two of
weird.
us, so we didn't imagine it. We both knew that.
And so the size of this thing, it wasn't, was it, I know this is going to sound, you've had this question before, presumably. It's not a bug then, it wasn't a firefly or anything like that, because obviously they can presumably fly around and not hit things, but this was definitely sort of like a UFO-y sort of thing.
No, it wasn't anything like a firefly. We'd seen lots of fireflies. I mean, we were um, real young, but we were on a farm and we saw fireflies all the time. They blink on and off and all that, and don't look anything like this. This didn't blink or anything. It looked like metal. It didn't look like firefly light.
Sure. Did it light up the whole attic sort of
Oh
space or just
no,
partial?
no. It was just you could just see it. The room was dark.
All right, so the room around was dark, so it get whilst you could see it as a light, it didn't sort of like shed that light, so to speak.
No, it was just lit all the time,
Weird.
flying around.
And looking back at that experience now, from where you are now to then, knowing what you know now, what do you think that was?
Well, later I read a book by Jenny Randalls called Star Children. And this was much late. After that, um, several years later, we heard about UFOs, but we didn't view that as a UFO. And you weren't supposed to talk about UFOs, but we talked about it because we didn't know it was a UFO. I thought UFOs were like airplanes back then.
Hmm.
And then I read that many, many years later. I read the book by Jenny Randalls, and she said that often people that have repeat UFO sightings start out when they're kids with like a small type, a small something like a UFO in their bedroom when they're kids, and that's what we saw. So in our case, though, there were two of us, so we each had another witness.
Well, that's good to have that corroborating witness. So
Yeah,
what this is like a soft introduction, is it, to UFOs, and that's what they like to give to kids?
something like that. I don't know. I
Hmm.
mean, I just that's what I read, and that we fit that um, fit that category, but I don't know.
Sure. Well, it's a nice introduction to it, but how, looking back at that since, because obviously you've chosen a science fields to enter, how does that play into your science grounding in your mind? Because obviously they sort of like contradict each other in a way, don't they? Because you've had this paranormal experience versus your logical grounding.
Well, I was brought up pretty poor, and so I knew I had to work. And
Fair
so
enough.
I knew I'd get in trouble if I talked about UFOs. And so I wanted to go into science. And so I didn't say anything about it, but um, and I didn't know it was a UFO for quite a few years. But now my interpretation is that I think there was mind control involved because my sister and I both woke up. This thing was in our room. We don't know why we woke up at the same time. And then we both became terrified at the same time. Just like that, Zoom, we're both terrified. And it's
Hmm.
like, may have had mind control. And it made me think that you shouldn't judge things by their appearance. I mean, some people see aliens or UFOs, and we saw a small thing, but maybe they can just appear any way they want to.
Hmm. Yeah, very, very weird sighting that one. Hey, you hear about these things actually similar to yours, but like in basketball-sized orbs, don't you? People say they're bouncing around their kitchen and God knows what else. So it's very similar to yours, but yours is obviously a lot smaller, but still get the same frightening effect.
Well, I wasn't frightened at first. I just thought, what is this? And I was very curious, and I noticed that it could see more or less. And then suddenly I was just terrified. Just all of a sudden, I was just so terrified you couldn't believe it.
Mm, I imagine. I mean, I know what I'd be like in that scenario as well. I think I wake up and have the same reaction. What is that? And then all of a sudden, ah! You know what I mean? It would make me
Yeah, I
go.
don't know. That's what made me think about mind control is that I wasn't scared. I was just curious, and just like something turned on in my brain, I was terrified, and I didn't have any reason to be terrified. I didn't, if I'd heard UFOs or spooks or something like that, I might have a reason, but I had no idea what it was. And then suddenly I was terrified, and so was my
See,
sister.
yeah, that suddenly thing's weird, isn't it? Because obviously with fear, we sort of build up to it, and you know when you're getting more and more scared, don't you? To that point of true anxiousness where it's proper fight or flight. But obviously, was yours literally like flicking a switch from nothing to then full scared?
Yeah, there was nothing to be
Mm,
scared of. I mean, I was just observing it and thinking, what is that? And then suddenly I was just so terrified you couldn't believe it. Just like
mm.
that, there was nothing that terrified me or built up to it or anything.
That either suggests an intention, sorry, to scare you, or the frequency of whatever that thing or magnetic field of that thing interacted with the brain that then did something. Do you know what I mean? Could be either.
Yeah, I just thought there was some kind of control over our mind going on.
All
But
right. And normally, if you think that, that's probably the reality, isn't it? Because normally our first thought tends to be the right one.
I mean, I don't know what else because if just I was terrified, it might just be me, but it was both of us. We both started screaming at the same time. And we
Wow.
both had been watching it up until then.
Have you had any encounters since?
Yeah, I've had several.
Oh, whoa.
Um, Another one was also when I was young, but I had heard of UFOs at the time. And we didn't have air conditioning, and I was outside sleeping on a rock one night for
As you do.
the
Yeah.
and there was a airplane um, thing that went over us, went to we're north of Columbus, Ohio, and airplanes went over, but this thing was just a round ball. It was about the apparent size of an airplane. That I looked north and it was coming. I woke up and looked north and it was coming. Then when it was right over me, suddenly all the dogs in the neighborhood began to bark. And it was on a farm, but I knew, the neighbors' dogs and
Mhm.
everything. And then our dog, which was locked in the kitchen and couldn't see anything, began to jump around like crazy and bark and everything. And then it went on over. And I was just terrified by that. But by that time, I'd heard of UFOs, and no, you don't talk about them. So I didn't say anything about it. And then later, uh, our farm was in Ohio, but later um, I was working in Washington, D.C. for the DIA, and my sister was at Drew University taking post-grad work. And we had a very long encounter with a UFO, which was totally unexpected. Since we were both on the east end of the country, we were going to go up and look at the New England states. And so I started out from Washington, D.C. at 6 o'clock one morning, picked up a couple of coworkers and drove up to Drew and took pictures of all of them and my sister. Then we drove up to Boston. We were planning to stay there all night and then go on up and see the states, but it was still daylight. And so I decided it was 1968, which we didn't have cell phones or anything back then.
Sure, sure.
And so anyway, I decided to look around some more. And so I went up the outer belt and came to Route 3, and it headed up north. And so I headed up north on it and drove into New Hampshire and took some pictures up there. And I found out later, I think it was sort of maybe up to sort of the area where the Betty and Barney Hill abduction took place, the end of it. But anyway, then we came back and we couldn't find rooms in Boston. Everything seemed to be filled up. And so we decided to go to the outer belt. And we were driving out of Boston. And there was this airport, Norwood Memorial Airport to the south. And we could see airplanes coming in with their landing lights on and their red and green wing lights and everything, and coming in and landing and things. And we were watching the airplanes sort of. And there was this white light that was lower than the airplanes, and it seemed to be following Route 95 down along the coast area and blinking. And we were watching it, and my sister started saying she thought it was a UFO. And I started saying, oh, it's a helicopter just blinking its landing lights. And oh, it was real bright. And I didn't really know what it was either. And so we continued and we got on Route 95, which is the main route along the coast. And there was a woods on one side. And I looked in the woods and there was this round thing. It was like it was made out of glass, and something seemed to be rotating around it. And in the middle was a spectrum. And as I remember it, it seemed to be red and blue and all shades of red and then purple and then all shades of blue and then red again. It was just going through this spectrum. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And then the inside of the car turned green. And I couldn't figure out why the inside of the car was green. It was just green, like a green light was on in it. And I looked around and I couldn't see anything. And, I suspected this thing, this round thing, but it wasn't green. And I didn't see green any place except inside our car. And so finally the green went away and we continued down the road and it was in front of us. And then my sister began to scream and scream and scream. She was screaming at me to pull off the road. It was going to come over the road. And I still thought she was crazy. And I started to point my hand out the window and say, no, that's a helicopter. But just then where I pointed, I saw something looked like a meteor way off in the distance. And then right there, this thing came over the road, the freeway. And it was this big thing. It was, it had 7 square windows when we both looked at it then. Big, like picture windows and square. It had a little red light on one end, a little green light on the other. It was coming real slowly over the road. And at that time, I decided my sister had been right. And something that she wrote later, she said at that time that it had shined a light in the car, which I wasn't aware of, but I was on the side toward it, and she was on the other side where she could see it. And she thought it was kind of, she just called it a strange light. But anyway, I was in photography at the DIA, and I had a Polaroid camera with a high-speed film and in the car. So I had to find the film and the camera, and then I had to load them. And so I was loading the film and the camera, and I thought I could just get a beautiful picture that would prove that UFOs exist and everything else, because I could get this big thing over the freeway with my high-speed film and all that. And I mean, it just took like time exposures, but I knew how to take time exposures with it. And so anyway, just when I was ready to take this beautiful, beautiful picture, this truck driver pulled over in front of us and came back and stood right beside me and said, "What are you doing?" And I thought that was a ridiculous question because there was this thing up here. And I pointed at it and said, "What's that?" Like it was an airplane or something. And he rotated around, looked in the exact opposite direction and said, "I don't see anything." Then he turned around and looked at me again, and I was getting the creeps. And so I'd be nervous about, a male standing beside me anyway. And then he said the same thing, "What are you doing?" And I looked at it, I pointed at it again, like stupid, and said, "What is that?" And he turned around, looked exactly the opposite direction, said, "I don't see anything." Then he turned around to me and gave some motion, I'm not sure what it was, pointed at his head or something, like I was crazy and I wasn't seeing anything. Although he never looked at it, he always looked in the opposite direction. And then he went back to his truck. Well, on something my sister wrote later, she said that it seemed to take a very long time for me to get film in the camera, but she didn't seem to, I mean, I just found this out recently. She didn't really see him. She was standing there too, and she didn't know he was there. I just found out that about 2 years ago. I always thought she saw him. But anyway, and then she said right after, while I was getting the film in the camera, which actually I was talking to this man, she said it sped away. And I didn't notice that but at the time, but then after I finished talking to him, I noticed it was a long ways away. I mean, I didn't pay attention to it. And so I was afraid if I tried to take a picture, I'd get lens flares from the freeway with my high-speed film, and there was a hill. And so I thought I'd run up the hill and try to get a picture from the top of the hill. And that's what I did. And I got 5 pictures. One of them turned out was really funny and I couldn't understand it, and came back to the car and pulled the Polaroids apart and everything.
Yeah.
And then the thing went over to the airport and began to circle, and it had a pattern. It would, from north to south, it goes fast. You just couldn't even see it. From south to north, it'd blink its lights on twice. And my sister kept saying all the way through, it's sending us signals. And I don't know what she was talking about. I don't know. She thought it had a blinking pattern of the lights when we saw it close, of the 3 lights would blink separately from the last 4. It was like the first 3 would blink twice, and then all 7, and then the next 4, and then go through a cycle. And I think she thought this was some kind of a signal that she was supposed to understand. But anyway, then I had missed this wonderful picture, and she was trying to see in the windows, and she couldn't see anything. There was just this bright light. And so we both didn't understand what we were looking at. And so it had been going south, and I thought it was going to go north. And so I wanted to turn my car around to the next intersection and come back. So I drove. The truck driver got right behind me. He turned these bright lights on so that they were shining right in my mirror and blinding me in the mirror, and started following us. And if I switched lanes, he switched lanes. If I slowed up, he slowed up. He wasn't trying to get around or anything. He was chasing us. And I was afraid he's going to kill us. And I needed to know how to get rid of him. And so what I decided to do was to go on the left-hand lane until I came to another intersection and then swerve off as fast as I could. And which is dangerous because somebody was passing on the other side.
Sure, yeah.
But anyway,
That sounds like something out of the movies, that does, Irina. You know they do that in the movies, don't they? When someone's chasing them,
well,
and you actually did it.
Yeah, and I thought we were going to get killed. I said goodbye to my sister and everything before I did that. She couldn't see either. And I asked her if she could see behind us, and she said no. And so anyway, then I turned around, came back, and it was still circling the airport, but then it started northwest. And so I went past the little ball on the ground on the other side of the freeway, and the car turned green again. Then we kept on following. And finally, I was on this really bad gravel road with potholes and everything else. And the houses were miles apart and everything. It was just going at a speed where I couldn't catch up with it because my car just over the potholes and everything that fast. So I had to turn around and come back. And we didn't find a motel. And I went on back to Drew that night. And we got back 6 o'clock in the morning, and we told her roommates about it, and they didn't believe us. And then we called our parents and told them. And I was supposed to pick up the two men I took, and I waited all day long, and they didn't show up. And finally, toward evening, I left and drove back to Washington, D.C. And then I had a poltergeist experience after I got.
Oh God, it's all happening for you then.
Huh?
It says all happening for you, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And then the two men I was supposed to pick up were really mad at me, and they said that they couldn't get in contact with us. Well, I had pictures of them standing there with my sister beside her dorm, and I don't know why they couldn't get in contact with us because, they didn't have cell phones then, but if we left the room, we asked her roommates to listen for the phone and get us. And so somehow, that night, I wrote up the whole thing. And later, just a couple of years ago, my sister found a letter she had wrote to my mother on that same day. And so we both had write-ups of exactly what happened. We didn't have to rely on our memories. And hers was real handy because it told things that mine didn't tell, because somehow I'd written every detail I could think of, but I didn't put times in. And she had times on hers. And so anyway, when I reported it, it was several years ago, to Bud Hopkins, and he asked, did you have missing time? Well, I thought we may have, because I think we started from Boston, New York, like about 10 or something. And we didn't get there until 6 in the morning, and it should only take about 3 hours, but I didn't know. And so I didn't answer, but when we found her write-up, we had actually been seeing it for like hours, but it didn't seem like it. And so we probably had some missing time. It's too late for him now because he's dead. But
yeah, unfortunate that. The green light thing, do you think that's the point at where something special happened? And when I say special, I mean like an abduction or something that might be the missing time at that green light.
Because a lot of times people that get abducted, they start out with something shining a light on them or seeing a light or something.
It's very heavily perceptual, your one as well, isn't it? Because your sister is seeing something slightly different than you're seeing, and vice versa. Also, that bloke, that truck driver, I've got two thoughts on him. He's also not seeing the UFO, is he? So there's a lot of weirdness going on with minds.
Yeah, he would look in the opposite direction every time. He didn't look, I was pointing at it and there it was, and he should have seen it. Instead, he'd turn around and look in the exact opposite direction and say, I don't see anything.
That's weird. So weird. My other thought with him is, do you think he was put there to obfuscate? to stop you,
Um,
getting stuff?
for a long time, I just didn't know. And then just within the last couple of years, my sister found that letter of hers. And I asked her, did you remember speaking to him? Because I should have known she didn't because of something else that happened. But yeah, she said she didn't remember talking to him. So it was like either they put something in my mind because she should have remembered, and or else they deleted something from her mind because she didn't remember him.
Yeah, very,
So I
very
thought there was
strange.
something metal. Now I think something metal was going on, but I didn't know until that. Um, I just didn't understand because
Hmm.
he obviously, if you point at something, you look at the direction, even a dog or a cat will look in the direction you point. And he
My
looked in the
dog, my dog
opposite
won't.
direction.
Every time I say, look, there's something in your bowl, he won't go there.
Oh, well, maybe not then.
Cats
Well,
will.
no puppy.
Your that case that you've just relayed to us there, it's got a lot of similarities with the Betty and Barney Hill, hasn't it? What with the thing coming over the road, the light shining, that sudden. I presume there was sudden scared. Were you suddenly scared, or were you not? Were you just intrigued?
Well, I can remember discussing it with her when it was happening. I mean, we were comparing and counting the windows to make sure we were both seeing the same thing because when it was there, the airplanes were circling way up and they weren't landing either. And we noticed that. And we'd both seen uh, blimps with lighted sides, and it was nothing like that. It made no noise. And I even have a YouTube channel with pictures of blimps with lighted sides on, so I'm familiar with them. It wasn't anything like that. Um, so uh, I just, after wondering all these years, and I finally asked my sister, and I thought, well, there was something metal going on,
Hmm.
mental.
Mental, yeah. Have you looked into it since, like air traffic and stuff, and or any other reports by other people re your sighting? So is there anything recorded or anything like that?
Well, at that time, I was working for the Defense Intelligence Agency with a real high security clearance, and I would not have said anything about it except I just brought the subject up of UFOs. But I certainly wouldn't say I was the only female there anyway, and I didn't go around saying I see UFOs. And
Hmm.
so uh, I tried to report it, and I looked up in the phone directory and found UFO, and it was NICAP. But I went to a pay phone and called him and reported it. And I didn't get the green light or anything because I didn't know those were related until later. But I didn't give my name or anything, so they didn't give a official report. But I was very nervous about the security and somebody might find out I had reported UFO, and I wanted to be real careful. Many years later, the internet and everything. Um, but I didn't find anything so far.
Okay, so you were
And
solitary witnesses then, yeah.
FIOA, the airport, and they said they didn't have records from that back that far.
That's a shame, yeah, because if you'd have had that as well, like a report of somebody else, that would just add fuel to the fire, wouldn't it, for your sighting?
Well, there were some other things. There was another book, if I can find it here. Um, it was called Encounter at Buff Ledge by Walter Webb. It was written in 1994 or something, after we had already reported ours, but um, it took place at fairly close to where we were. It was about 100 or so miles away, and it was about this camp, and they saw UFO. And it was just a few weeks after our sightings. And so it was real close to us in location and time. And this was about an abduction. Two people were abducted, but it had several similarities. Uh, the shape of the object was sort of like what we saw. It had light on one end, light on the other. And then it also had described these little balls of light that they called satellite objects. And that was what I saw on the ground. I mean, the way they described it was just exactly like what I saw, and on the ground. And so I'd always wondered, what is that thing? And then years later, I read that book, and when they were abducted, one of these satellite objects shone a light on them, and that was kind of like what happened to us.
Hmm.
And then also I read about, we were close to the town of Sharon, which is on the other side of the um, freeway, and there was another uh, report from Sharon I found later that was an object shaped like ours with big windows and little lights, one on one side and one on the other. And it was a lot like ours because they said they looked to the east and they saw, first of all, meteor, and then this thing came close up. And there were a number of other reports like that where they would see a meteor, and that even was like the Betty and Barney Hill case where you see something way off and then suddenly something is right on top of you, and that's sort of what happened to us. So there were
Hmm.
a lot of similarities.
Regarding that incident there, and I'll ask you about potentially other ones in a second. But have you gone back since and had regression therapy or anything to test whether you had missing time, or are you ignoring that?
I reported uh, the whole thing on in 1984, which is many years later. Um, and Bud Hopkins tried to hypnotize me, and then
Ah,
several other people tried, but I just don't hypnotize at all. I mean, just exactly nothing happens under hypnosis for me, so it didn't help
no
me any.
clucking like a chicken or anything like
No.
that. I'm the same. I think I don't hypnotize easily because I have been to a hypnotist once and I never felt as if I went under.
Well, I definitely didn't go under.
Well, there you go.
I
I
mean, I was
wonder if that's
interested. I thought I'd find out something, but it didn't work at all.
See, I'm glad you went because a lot of people I speak to are actually scared to even bother going in case what they find out is worse than what, the mystery. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I guess I had sort of, the first two, I was just absolutely terrified. Then on that one, my sister and I remember discussing it with her while it was happening. Why aren't we scared? And, we were seeing this thing close to us, and we were asking, why aren't we scared? And we weren't scared then. And it seemed like the other two I'd seen were, I was just so terrified. It was just out of this world terror. And this one, nothing. The only thing I could figure out, maybe it was because we were by a freeway and so we felt that there were people around or something like that. I don't know. But
Well, that's possible. Or there's a nefarious answer, which is you were taken before and programmed not to be scared.
yeah, I wondered about that too. I mean,
Mm.
maybe there was something programmed in my mind that um, to not be scared, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad deal.
Well, either way you think about it, it could be good or bad. Yeah, it's a bit freaky. Have you had any other encounters since that one?
I had one in 1984, and I was still working in science, so I didn't have any pay attention to UFOs except just in the back of my mind. But in 1984, one day I was just going through my normal life of working, having a family, and everything normal. And one night I just woke up one morning and I was just terrified of UFOs for no reason whatsoever. And um, I was scared to go out of the house. I had to go to work, of course, so I had to go out of the
Mm.
house. But I was terrified, and I had no reason, nothing worked me up to it or anything, just plump. And so anyway, I decided to report our old sightings, and so I called the Center for UFO Studies, which was Dr. Heineck back then,
Mm.
and they sent me a report form to fill out. And so I was at work one day at noon, and I thought, well, I'll spend my noon filling out this report form. And as I was filling it out, I walked down the hall for some reason, I don't know why, and was going down the stairs, and I looked up and saw this thing up above the building, and I couldn't figure out what on earth it was. And so another person, a graduate student, was walking down the stairs, and I asked her, "What's that?" And we both looked at it and couldn't figure it out. So we went to the office of the department, the physiology department, and there were a bunch of other people, and we pointed it out, and it was still there. And people looked at it, and we asked if there was a telescope, and people back then didn't have cameras, and nobody could figure out what it was. And it was in sight so long that I called a man at Battelle that I knew did UFOs. I worked at Battelle too, and asked him. And he said he didn't see it. He said he went up to the ceiling in Battelle. Battelle was on the course that it was taken. It was passed over Battelle, then the building at OSU, and then over the Columbus Airport, or close to the landing. Okay. And he said he didn't see it. And he said that he called Columbus Airport, and they saw nothing on radar. But the people in the office saw it. So it, if they say you're crazy, well, yeah, I had witnesses. And so I collected, everybody I collected reports from either was or is a professor. So I had a pretty qualified group. And of course, I told him, I'm not going to use your name on anything. And if I wasn't a UFO investigator. If I had been, I wouldn't have used their name, but I'd have seen if there were other reports. But I collected their reports in writing, and everybody described what it looked like in good descriptions. And I turned it in, all of them, into the Center for UFO Studies. And so that was another sighting. And I had other witnesses, which I was.
It's amazing that you did that, because a lot of people, I know from listening to the chap who does the National UFO Reporting Center, I can't remember his name, but he always says that people don't collect the information, write it down straight away, and then report it straight away. They hold on to it for years and then go back and do it. You, in your initial one with your sister, wrote everything down, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. And then you collected all that stuff from all those other people straight away. What drove you to write those stuff down straight away? Was it just to record the incident so no one could say it didn't happen, or was it something else that drove you to do it?
Well, I've had weird things happen to me, and nobody believes me. And so whenever anything happens, now that you can carry around a camera, I take pictures of it and try to get other witnesses and everything, because I get tired of saying, well, you just imagine this. Well, like with my sister, there were two of us both times. And it turned out first of all, we called our parents right after we'd seen that, but she found this letter just recently that she'd wrote to our parents. And then I had just written down everything immediately, but I was scared to report it on account of being with the DIA. So I reported it years later, but I didn't have to rely on our memory. We both had, write-ups.
I know. Well, still well done for you for writing it all down, on the other one, collecting all that information, because that's really, really useful. And for anyone who has a UFO experience listening to this, do exactly what Irena did. Write it down straight away, and then almost report it straight away. We're in a better place and time now, so you can report straight away without too much ridicule. So do that immediately. You mentioned the DIA there. Now, obviously, you work for the DIA. Can you tell me a little bit about what you did there, or will I be dead if I ask?
Oh, you'll be dead. No, it was years ago. And since then they published the name of my clearance and things like that you're supposed to just disappear. But what I did at that time that was kind of related was I was working for Air Order of Battle, where you identified airplanes from the satellite photography. And when that happened, I mentioned it to my supervisors. I didn't say I saw a UFO, but I just mentioned, oh, what do you think about UFOs or something? Because, I was pretty stressed out, but I didn't want to say anything weird. And so it turned out my supervisor said that right before I'd come in that area, that they had reported a UFO on their photography. And they showed it to me, and it was on two prints, and you could sort of adjust it and see it in stereo and things. And they were really perplexed because they said they reported it to their supervisors, and they were the experts. One of them was a GS-13 or something like that, and the people they reported to, their supervisors, said it wasn't there, that it was a spot on the film, and it was on 2 films. It wasn't a spot on the film or anything else, and it moved a little bit between the 2 pictures. But so that made me think way back then, when you didn't talk about those things, that somebody high in the government probably is collecting information on UFOs.
That's ace to see them. When you saw that image, what did it look like?
I think it was over the Black Sea, and I think it was near Ukraine, and there was a mountain and a military thing over the other side, and we were studying military bases and airplanes and things. And I don't remember exactly where it was, but it was like it was roundish, but it had a big dome on it. And I had to resize the pictures to get it in stereo. So it looked like the dome was kind of large, but I couldn't really tell from what I did photographically, but it looked like round with a dome. And there was just nothing in the history of the area of anything that looked like that. And that's when we turned and reported it.
That's amazing, isn't it? So it looked like the literal cliched flying saucer, flying UFO.
Yeah, it was over water, and there was no wave, crashing into it, so it was flying. But there was just nothing historically that was like that before or after in that area.
Was it a black and white photo, or was it color at that time for satellite photography?
Right.
Black and white.
Uh-huh.
Amazing. In your work, in your entirety of your work doing satellite photography, did you discover anything else random? Not take UFOs aside, like I don't know, like a new pyramid or anything like that.
Oh, well, some of the people I worked with would see the first of some model airplane they were putting out and things like that and report it. But I don't think anybody was looking for UFOs, really. You'd think that, now you would be, but I think back then you were so repressed on the deal that you didn't even think about it.
But presumably your work was literally just satellite photography of foreign nations across military bases and stuff, just to see what they're up to. Yeah. It's a shame it wasn't doing like generic satellite crossovers and then you have photos of every region. So I wonder if you saw like a new pyramid or a new structure that was never there, that no one ever knew existed, and you were the first to find it, that sort of thing.
Well, sometimes I don't remember the airplane, but it was a big Soviet airplane. Everybody was thrilled. They saw the first one of those. Things like that.
I hope you got a raise.
I left and got married.
So they didn't give you a raise then? That's a no.
Well, I did get, I went to GS-11, which is PhD level.
Oh, fair play. And then you started writing books. How many books have you written?
That was after I retired, though.
Oh, is it? Okay, fair enough. So there's a long gap there in between of other things.
Yeah, I've written 5 so far about UFOs and published them with Flying Disc Press in England.
With Philip Mantle, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Of those 5 books, should we go through them and then you can talk a little bit about each of them?
Mm-hmm.
Which was your first one relating to UFOs then?
My first one's UFOs Today.
I can't see it because it's a bit blurry because you've got that blur filter on, but
okay.
Put it right in front of your face. That's it. Now I can see it. UFOs Today. Cool.
Okay. And it was, I think I submitted it in 2016. It came out in 2017. And it was a chronological study of UFOs, and mainly ones that I had investigated myself because I'd been investigating them as I got closer to retirement and all that. And it was about, I started out with 1939, and another person I had talked to these women that um, were um, related to the Secretary of State Hull, and he had asked their father to come in and go into a room under the Capitol where they said there was a UFO, and um, oh, I don't remember. Yeah, I think they said there were creatures or something that were preserved. And they said there was this big chamber under the Capitol, and that the Hull was the Secretary of State, and he was the founder of the United Nations, and Roosevelt wanted him to be vice president, I think. And this was, and they thought it was around 1939, which was before anybody had heard of UFOs. And so they saw this thing, there was no name for it, and they called them creatures and things. And then, and we talked to the daughters, and they said their parents and uncle and everything said not to say anything about it until long after they were dead. And so then they started talking about it finally. And then I also went with Kenneth Arnold, and I had accidentally picked up his original book. And people just know him as a person who reported UFOs that were flying around Mount Rainier and Adams and things. But he had a really unusual experience that I went into detail because it was like way back then in 1947, he's the first person that said, these may be vehicles with pilots and stuff. And he had something like abduction-like experience, Men in Black and everything else way back then when nobody had ever heard of anything like that. And so I went into detail on that. And then on Roswell, and we had another witness that had an interesting story about Roswell. And so I just mainly talked about UFO things that I had investigated myself.
Amazing. That's 1939 case. I don't think I've heard of that before. So a captured or given or whatever a UFO with some creatures under the Washington Capitol.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
I mean,
Where did they get it from? What was your investigation turn up?
Nothing. They didn't know. They just said that that Hall had taken their father down and showed him this. And it was top secret, and they weren't supposed to talk about it, but he told them that after everybody was dead to talk about it. But it's been reported in several books since then. They've been interviewed all over the place and things since then.
Is it? I've not heard of it before personally, but then yeah, I don't take this in a weird way. I'm just not one of those persons that read books. I'm more
Oh,
visual media. I know that sounds awful because mostly I interview people who are authors and stuff, but I don't read because I have some sort of weird dyslexia where I have like a contrast issue between the black and white, and that it's not that the letters jumble. I just can't fixate on the letters a bit. It's not easy for me. So I'm more into media and stuff. But yeah, I've not heard of that one before. What did the girls say then, or the daughters say about what their father said it looked like and stuff? Can you remember?
I think they said it was metallic like, and I think they said what they called the creatures, I mean, now we'd say aliens, were preserved like in formaldehyde or something. But that's about it. They didn't know where it came from or anything like that.
They didn't give a description for what the aliens looked like, so whether we could say they were alien greys or something else.
No, but
That's
nobody
a
had ever
shame.
heard of aliens back then either.
Yeah, yeah. Wasn't coined, was it, till probably Whitley Strieber's or Betty and Barney Hill's encounter?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, that was before anybody had heard of UFOs or flying saucers or anything else.
God, yeah. Yeah, that's amazing.
But,
Um,
uh, one thing is, he talked about this chamber under the White House, under the Capitol, and we didn't know, if there's a chamber under the Capitol, but I think we know that now.
Mm,
But he was right
mm.
on that. They were right on that too.
I wonder if that stuff is still there or whether it got, you know, excreted somewhere else.
Imagine after it got in the news that it was replaced someplace else.
Yeah. Probably to the wards Wright Patterson, isn't it? Because that place that you were working at for a little bit, or at least had interaction with, a lot of things were supposedly sent there.
It was sort of
Mm.
mecca of UFO research.
How many obviously you said that book there that your first book was sort of like inspired by your investigations and stuff. How many investigations have you actually physically been involved with?
You'll know too many to count.
What
I never,
thousands sort of thing?
I mean, when it started, I joined a group and I'd go out and investigate with people, but I never really counted them. So I don't know.
And did you do mainly field work, or was it like calling from an office or staying home and doing investigation on the internet, that sort of thing? Or is it you are physically going out to a location, interviewing people and stuff?
Yeah, I was interviewing people for the most part. It wasn't done by computer. I went out and interviewed people, and I usually went with other people to do the
Yeah.
interview.
Is there a commonality that you found across all your investigations that you think, oh, that means it's going to be this? You know, the answer to the questions.
No, I just have lots of questions and no answers.
Yes, I'm the same. I have loads of questions, and people give me some answers, but then does it go in and is it the real answer? I don't know. It's a big puzzle, isn't it? Trying to work it all out.
Definitely is.
So has your investigations then thrown up more questions than when you had when you started?
Well, I gave up for quite a few years because I wasn't finding out anything. I mean,
Ah,
in science, you do research, you find out things. Well, with UFOs, you do research and you still don't know anything. So, but then I got back into it later, and
hmm.
that's when I started writing books.
Is that the mean you never achieved satisfaction, so to speak? Because with science, yeah, like you say, there's a conclusion, and you can sort of like almost put that to bed, can't you? And then be
No,
satisfied that you've achieved something, but you
no.
can't with the other. Hmm. I feel the same as you, I think. Open ended is not as good as putting something to bed. Amazing. Okay, so what was your next book post that one?
My next book was called Sacred Corridors. Can you see
Sa-
it?
Sacred Corridors. Yeah, I saw that briefly.
It was chiefly about um, the places that investigate UFOs, and it was chiefly about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Ah,
And and it was also about Battelle Memorial Institute. And both places, Wright-Patterson is the most, important place for UFOs, or always was. And I had been sent by my employer there for conferences and been in the secured area and been in the secured area for several other things too. And I had also worked at Battelle, and I also, it, they're both in Ohio. And so I knew some of the people that worked on Project Blue Book and worked at Battelle and um, that sort of thing.
so
And so,
did that book just report stuff that's in history, or did you like investigate to find out new stuff and bring new stuff to people? What was it in that book?
well, it was published in uh, 2018. Um, and it, I was mainly just talking about the former investigations and my own experience there. And
Sure.
um, for example, I was in the Blue Room, which is famous. I didn't
Can
know it.
you can you can you say what the Blue Room is? Because it doesn't ring a bell for me.
It's the place at Wright-Patterson that's supposed to contain all the UFO information and photos and creatures and all that.
All right.
But it's a folklore thing. Um, Big people like Goldwater wanted to go in. He was rebuffed and said, we don't talk about that. And a lot of people, that were big, I mean, Goldwater was a presidential candidate and he didn't get in and things. And so it's famous here as the place where the UFO information was collected. Well, I had become acquainted with the archivist at Wright-Patterson. Once I was at a UFO meeting, and I was in the back with some other people. And there was this man in the front with a bunch of books that was writing down everything. And I got curious and I walked up, sat down beside him, started observing him. And it turned out he was the archivist at Wright-Patterson. And so he decided, he just showed us all kinds of things, including the Blue Room area, which I think it was where they did Project Blue Book at first. But so when I had been sent there by my employee, or it's most of the air, there's a famous Wright-Patterson Air Force Museum with all the airplanes and everything, but all the rest of the bases secured with chain link fences around it and guards and everything you can think of. Well, inside that, there's this one building that has its own security besides being a secured area, has big cameras mounted all over the roof and in the parking lot and everything you think of. So if a mouse walked by, I think they would know it, or even a fly maybe. And so it was a very impressive building. And I didn't know that. It was published later that that was a Blue Room building. But he took us to a conference in there about UFOs. And we attended a conference and it was pretty interesting. Except several people started talking about the pictures of UFOs. And then the one that was conducting the meeting halted everybody and said, "Stop, there's uncleared people in here," which was us. And so we thought that, the conversation would have gone in a different direction if,
Had you not been there, yeah.
And so, but we were escorted, so I didn't get a chance to look around, see if there were bodies in the basement or anything. There's all kinds of stories that there are. But...
Well, yeah, you hear those stories, don't you? That I think there's that truck driver or something that saw an arm fall off something, or a table, wasn't it? So there's all these stories, like you say, that could be folklore related to Wright Pat. Where would you put your money on it all being true, or is it stuff that has built up over time into this grand
I'm
theater?
sure there's underground chambers at Wright-Patterson because I worked on the Ohio Department of Health, and we had schematics of Wright-Patterson, which is also a Superfund site. It had an atomic reactor there and things. And it showed some underground things, but I think there were a lot of underground things that weren't, that were secured that they didn't mention. But we studied we interviewed some informants who said, there's this chamber here underground with bodies and this chamber here and things like that. And so I was driving around, I took pictures of things, including digging, where he said there was underground chambers and things. So I think there's underground chambers, and there's all kinds of stories about the bodies in the underground chambers and things. But I didn't see any, so I'm conservative, and I was just saying what other people saw. I didn't see anything myself, but I'm sure there's underground chambers.
Well, obviously that one person who stood up at the front giving the talk that said, "Hold on, we can't go further," that sort of like gives you leeway to think that there are things there. Yeah.
It gave us
Stop. That archivist, did you ask him any questions? Because obviously a lot of things must have passed through his hands or across his eyes.
Well, one thing, he was supposed to see if there was a change when UFOs came out, if there was a change in our ability. I mean, a lot of people say that we learned to do compact discs and fiber optics and things from the UFOs. And so he was supposed to check that out and see if there was some big change in our ability to do things technically after UFOs. And there was, but he didn't see any of it tying to UFOs. I mean, he just said, well, we're developing, in new directions and things. He didn't see any tie to UFOs. But he sort of, it was like he was kind of telling us that something's going on, but he had, it was cleared and everything, and he couldn't actually say that.
So he's telling
And
you without telling you.
yeah,
Hmm. God, the things that we all want to know, eh? That there's secrets, like you say, secrets in the corridors and within those sacred corridors that are locked inside people's minds that they cannot tell us. Would you want to know?
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, if they're chasing me down the road and about to kill me, I'd like to know what's going on.
yeah. I'm of your mind, but is it? I asked somebody the other day this question. Is it a case that we know the governments around the world seem to be obfuscating? They're not telling us directly this is what's going on, right? That's either because they don't know what's going on, or are they protecting the human race because if we knew it could lead to something really bad? Do you think that's what they're doing, or are they just hiding because they want to keep a secret?
Well, I think that if something else is here, which probably is, because we would stand out in the universe as having all this life here and everything,
Hmm.
that when we meet a different civilization, the conquerors come in and take everything and, you know, use them for slaves and all kinds of things that are abusive. And so we're worried about, if something came here, they would be like us, which they may be. And we may be, you know, eh, they may be here and maybe they've taken over us and we don't know. But it seems to me like no matter how bad it is, that if you know something, you have a little bit of chance of doing something. If you're totally ignorant and there's something terrible, well, I think you should still kind of know as much as you can. I mean, because even it's terrible.
Yeah, no, I
Because
agree with you because it gives you a fighting chance to probably
yeah.
overturn it, doesn't it? Even if that's really small. So, knowing that, do you think that the governments of this world are working in favor of us or against us? What would you say?
Well, I would say they have more information than they give out. Um, and I don't think they were doing it to favor us because I don't think governments do that. I think they, I think
Hmm.
first, I think that when people became aware of UFOs and viewed them as vehicles with pilots, and I don't even know if that's right or not, that they thought they may be from other countries. And so they immediately classified everything so that, if they were from other countries, they could spy on them and everything. And I think it's been classified ever since for that reason, for military reasons, that they don't want, their enemies to know what we know and all that. But I think some governments are more open than others, but I don't know if they say, they have little green men in cages and all that, and they know all about them and everything. But if they did, I think that anybody that had the knowledge would just take over the world immediately. So I suspect that they don't know that much. I don't
No,
know.
that makes sense, actually. That's a very good idea. Sorry, good point. Because if you did learn everything from the aliens, yeah, there would be no Russia-Ukraine conflict, would you? Because you'd have so much technology, you could just go in and stop everything. In theory. Yeah, that makes sense. Hmm. So that's your second book. What did you learn about yourself? It could have been the writing process, or it could have been how you approached that book from the first book. I.e., did the first book teach you new tricks to then do something on the second book?
Yeah, because well, for example, I just wrote a article in the MUFON Journal about a year ago about disclosure. And it was right before the government kind of disclosed a little bit. And I was saying there was another disclosure earlier, and that was the Pinnacle Memorandum. Did you hear about that? It was back in the 1950s, and they had the Robertson panel where they reviewed UFOs and said nothing exists, and everybody's crazy that sees them and all that. Well, it was from Battelle, and the person, well, Project Blue Book is saying there's no such thing as UFOs, you're crazy and all that. Well, Project Blue Book was actually doing a secret study done at Battelle, which is a real good contractor for the government that does excellent scientific work. And the person at Battelle had written this secret document to the Project Blue Book saying, don't do this review, which was the Robertson panel, because we don't have our data yet. We haven't analyzed it and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's what somebody went to a lot of trouble to get out. And it was official. It was official government document saying that they weren't ready. They don't have the data ready. Well, the Robertson panel went right ahead. They didn't care less whether the data was ready or anything else. And they said UFOs don't exist, and came to all these conclusions that wasn't based on anything because Battelle didn't have the data anyway.
That's just typical pure obfuscation and putting their own conclusion in that they wanted you guys and everyone else around the world to think is the answer. I don't like that approach, but I can understand it if it is a national security and they think there is a genuine threat to, say, humans' existence. That makes sense. That's the only reason that I would say that high-level security and secrecy should stay. Other than that, no, you need to release everything. We need to know as a whole species, don't we, so we can improve. That's my thoughts.
Lots of geniuses in the human race that might, have different ideas instead of just the government people. But so I said that was the first disclosure, because Project Blue Book was saying UFOs don't exist. Well, hypocritically, on the other hand, they were having it studied by Battelle, and the Battelle study had positive results. That statistically, they did some good studies and showed that yes, there's a phenomenon, UFOs exist. But when that was unclassified after a while, but the government then wrote a study and said a summary, and then said, oh, they don't exist, which was the opposite of what their findings were. But nobody looked at the statistics, which were complicated. They just read the summary and said, oh, nothing exists, and forget about it. And so, that was still the same when they go around and say, everybody's crazy if they see a UFO, they don't exist.
And that doesn't fly these days, does it? Because nowadays, everything is really heavily scrutinized. And the internet, I think, has really helped there.
It doesn't help them either, because they're losing data if they throw away all the observations, which they were doing, and nobody would have the nerve to report anything.
Yeah, I agree on that. I've spoken to a few people a number of times, and it's always the outliers they tend to throw away. But actually, that's where the true data is in those outliers that they throw away, and then they average down to say, sorry, it's nothing. Well, no, you can't do that. You never do that in space science, as an example, would you? You wouldn't say, oh, let's throw away that planet because it doesn't fit our model of where we think it should be. No, you model it on everything. But that's weird. That's weird. That's just people through history. And what was your next book post that one? Was this where you investigated Pascagoula?
No, the next one was my own experience.
Oh.
Called that Inside the Lightning Ball. And I covered those experiences that I told you about. Mm-hmm. I also had filmed Marfa is a famous place where they see UFOs.
The Marfa Lights, yeah.
Yeah. And I had been at Marfa, and they have a viewing area, and looked at this viewing area, and people seem to be thinking they're seeing UFOs, and I just thought they were traffic. But I knew some people that lived on top of a volcano. Actually, it was extinct in Texas, that overlooked Marfa for a long ways away. And one night, I had stayed there a lot, so I was familiar with it. One night, I saw a light over toward Marfa, and so I got my video out and videotaped it for quite a while. And I put that on YouTube. I didn't know what it was. It was blinking on and off. And it blinked on and off for quite a while. And so I said, maybe that's a Marfa light. Because the place I was staying was on a road called High Lonesome. And it was a trail, and about one car a day would go through it. It was real isolated. There weren't just houses a long ways away from each other. And so I didn't know what the light was. It wasn't just something like you're in a city and see a light. I mean, this was strange. And so I filmed that. And the reason I called it Inside the Lightning Ball was because I talked about lightning balls and compared them to UFOs too. And I called it that because I started out with, I was inside a lightning ball. And you may not believe this, but one day I was at that place, and it was on the house was built on the edge of a volcano, and you can hit in the volcano and the little up thing in the middle and see sort of roughly. I mean, it's been extinct for zillions of years, but one day I was out on the porch, and it was a porch that had beams that supported it. And I was just filming the volcano, and you could see this big telescope, McDonald Observatory, way off in the distance. And so I was just filming, and suddenly a lightning bolt came right down and landed. Oh, it was just feet away from me, but it was on the ground, and I was on a porch, and it didn't kill me. And I had my camera going while this happened, before and after. And I saw this big bolt come down, and there was just a whiteout. And I thought, there's a round thing, whiteout. And anyway, then all kinds of alarms went off on the house and everything.
I imagine, yeah.
And I went in, and I couldn't see or hear for a while because the lightning was so bright that I couldn't get my eyes adjusted, or my ears were ringing besides all the alarms in the house. And so finally I replayed it, and all I could see was a whiteout on my film. And I was really disappointed. And then later I put the video in the computer and played it in slow motion. And I still couldn't see the bolt come down, but I could see right up until the bolt came down. And then there was a whiteout, which I thought was inside the lightning ball. And then when I slowed it down, there was a cell tower, like about 150 yards away or so, with guy wires. And the guy wire on my side that went up to the top of the thing had electricity shorting right up the guy wire.
Amazing.
And that was pretty amazing because it showed what a strong electrical current. I mean, this electricity had gone through the ground to a guy wire and shorted up the guy wire. So it was pretty impressive. And I just named it that because you don't very often get a video of the inside of the lightning ball.
God, no. I know there's tales of people who have been struck by lightning and have still lived and stuff, and they say it's one of the worst experiences ever to, go through. How far away was it from you? Like, were we talking like 2 feet, 3 feet, 10
Well,
foot?
I was on a porch, and the porch was maybe 10 or 15 feet in the air, and it had wooden posts.
Oh, I see, off the ground, yeah.
In barrels with sand in them. And so I don't think it was very far. I saw the blue light come down, and I think it was just feet away from me, but it landed on the ground. And so it didn't kill me, but there was a huge amount of electricity such that it went through the ground and was still shorting up this guy wire a long ways away. So it was pretty impressive. I mean, I'm sure, if I'd been on the ground, it would have killed me.
God, yeah.
But
when you went inside, was your hair all like this?
not,
stuck up for it?
I mean, I was just almost knocked out by the light and the sound, the big boom and the big flash of light and everything. It was a while before I could see or hear.
Was there a particular smell that came from it?
I don't think so.
No, that's fair enough. I just wondered if there's like an ionizing smell or something like that,
There, the house had some kind of an alarm, and the alarm really went out, and the electricity went out for a while. And I forget what else. I was between it and where the alarm went off. And so whatever went through me too, but
Mm.
I didn't
That's
get shocked at all. I just, it was my ears and my eyes that weren't working for a while.
no, fair enough. Well, you know, that's a hell of an experience to go through. Um, it leads on to the thing about Martha lights, because isn't that meant to be some measure of Earth energy, whether it be tectonic plates moving and it creates this energy for these orbs, or what's meant to be Martha lights? Is that what you got it down to in the end, or did you put it down to um, true UFO sort of phenomena?
Well, I had looked at what they called the Marfa lights from the viewing area, and I didn't think they were anything. I just thought they were cars in the
Cars,
mountains.
okay.
But this was something totally different. It was a light that was blinking on and off, and it was fairly large. And it looked to me like it was over Marfa, but I really couldn't tell because I was about 20 miles away. But it wasn't anything I ever saw before. And I was up on top of a mountain, and there wasn't anything, it was a decline up and over to Marfa. So it was something in the air. It wasn't just, something sticking up.
Sure.
And so I had no idea what it was. So I just speculated that might be an Earth light,
Yeah, Earth light,
although I
that's it.
didn't think Earth lights look like that. It was night, and I just saw this light. Um, and Marfa's in a big volcanic cauldron that just went for miles and miles and miles. And there was all kinds of orogenies and mountain building and volcanoes there, zillions of years ago. And so it could have been something geological, but I didn't really think so, because I think Earth lights don't quite look like a round ball that blinks on and off. And so I just didn't know. I just speculated maybe it was and maybe it wasn't. I don't know.
Well, exactly how would you know, short of capturing it, which no one has managed to do thus far. Let's talk a bit about your writing process, because I like the what sits behind the books, right? So, what is your writing process? Do you dedicate specific time, or is it just ad hoc when you do your writing?
Um, well, like I said, for my working life, I didn't say anything about UFOs until I got real close to retirement.
Hmm.
And then, um, well, what came up next was something that had to do with the uh, Pascagoula, and that was years ago, um, many years ago in 1973. Pascagoula was 1973, October the 11th. Um, I was living in Missouri, and my mother had called one night and said, "Did you hear that noise?" And she's in Ohio, and I was in Missouri, 600 miles. And so I said, "No." And, I told her she was crazy, that I couldn't hear it. And she kept on asking me. And she was a real logical, skeptical person. And that seemed funny. And then several days later, she called and said there was just a huge, huge UFO wave going on there. People were hiding in their basements or staying out and keeping their kids in, and everything you can think of. And so I was busy and I didn't pay too much attention to it. But a number of years later, I was working at Ohio State, and they had a newspaper room with actual newspapers in it. You wouldn't believe that now. But for some reason, I just thought, well, it'd be interesting to go in and see if I could find out when my mother made that call about the noise. And so I went in, there were zillions of papers, and I didn't know the date or anything else. I was just roughly guessing. I was roughly guessing it was the middle of October in 73. So I went there, and there were all these papers, and I thought, I'll never find it. So I thought I'd look at a few. Well, pretty soon I found it. It said there was a little note about this big sound. And so I had a date on it, which was the Pascagoula date, actually.
Mm.
And it it was about the same time as the abduction, but I didn't pay attention to the abduction. I was kind of interested in why there was a huge sound that everybody heard, but there's no explanation for it. And so anyway, I wrote something about it, and the state seismologist of Ohio contacted me, and we went over a lot of seismograph things. And in 87, I wrote article in a scientific journal about this sound, which was actually the time of the Pascagoula abduction, which I paid no attention to whatsoever. But then I started working with Philip Manold of Flying Disc Press, and he had then published Calvin Parker's, who was one of the Pascagoula witnesses. And usually with abductions, they're off in the distance in the woods someplace where, with one witness and nobody knows anything about it. Well, in this case, it was totally different because there were a lot of other people that saw something at the same time, including my mother. Something came to us at the same time even. And so I was interested, and he wanted me to interview people in the US because he was in England and they have an accent, and down in Pascagoula they have an accent.
Very broad, yeah.
So I interviewed all kinds of people and got into that, and recently published a book with him. I published one, which was Beyond Pascagoula, and that was a lot of about the
it's still blurry, but I'll link to it anyway. Now I can see it. Beyond Pascagoula, yeah.
And about the big wave of 1973, how it went all over the place, and people all over the place saw UFOs and things. But what I mainly wrote about there was the sound, because there was a lot of evidence of it. And I think it was something provable scientifically, that something happened that wasn't explained. And then since then, Philip and I wrote this one.
Beyond Reasonable Doubt.
Yeah, together. And that was about Pascagoula too. And I just covered, we just covered that it was, well, we call it Beyond Reasonable Doubt, because usually abductions, there's nothing whatsoever for evidence. And in this case, there was a whole lot of documentation of other people seeing things at that same time and other events happening right then. So we were saying that there was enough evidence to, circumstantial evidence to convince a jury that something might happen.
Hence the term Beyond Reasonable Doubt. Yeah, yeah. Because when I spoke to Philip a few months ago now, and we went through the case, and I knew the case from UFO shows like Coast to Coast AM and Midnight in the Desert and things like that. So I've heard of it before, but that he gave me the new information that there were other people that also reported UFOs that night, which I'd never heard of before. And now you linked this sound, which I'm interested in. So what was the sound? Was it a humming? Was it a trumpety sound? Or was it like a, rumbly sort of sound? What was it?
Well, I mean, it's unbelievable. I remembered from that, way back to my mother calling me, but she definitely did, because I wrote that thing in the scientific journal years before I started working with Philip. And the way my parents described it was like an explosion, but it was so odd that it was written up. It was during the time when there were sonic booms too, and it was written up as a sonic boom. But it was odd enough that it made the newspapers all across the country, and so I could get the newspapers and find out that when it was first heard, it was in Iowa, and then it traveled across the country to, it went over Washington, D.C. to the ocean. And it was about, I could calculate the speed, and it was about 3 times the speed of sound.
Crikey.
And it was, I compared it a lot to, there you have, to a sonic boom. And with sonic booms, by that time, there's information on how far away the sonic boom carpet will go, for the airplane, so, and all that. Well, this was nothing like a sonic boom, because it was way, way larger than a sonic boom. But usually if a sonic boom is that large, this was way larger. It means the airplane is high. If the airplane is high, the sonic boom is attenuated, so that, well, I could calculate in some places this might be like 15 miles high or something, or 50 even. But from the size of the boom, So it shouldn't have been heard at all. But instead, people are running out of their houses and thinking there was an explosion right there where they were. And windows were being shattered and all kinds of things, which wouldn't happen with something 50 miles high. And so it just made no sense in physics at all. There was no explanation. It went over Washington, D.C., and of course was ignored. So it was really strange. It just kind of disobeyed the laws of physics, because it should have been not even heard. Instead, people thought their houses were exploding and things.
What was it put down to at the time? What was the conclusion in 73?
The conclusion was that it was a Earth grazing meteor. I mean, one that just hit and then flew away.
Bounced off, yeah, yeah.
I could easily disprove that, because meteors are a lot faster than that, and they have to be an escape velocity before they can be Earth grazing. I mean, they can't go back up if they're not escape velocity. Well, this was much slower than a meteor, so it wasn't a meteor.
So if it's not a meteor, it's not an aircraft, obviously one of ours at that time, clearly. The only conclusion you could draw that it would be a UFO, and then you obviously, with the date, you're linking it exactly to the Pascagoula incident.
Yeah, it seemed to be about the same time as the abduction, but there was a whole lot of other things going on too. And it just made no sense if you read a physics textbook or things about studies of sonic booms. It just made no sense at all physically.
See, with that, the sound, you don't often hear of any sound associated with UFOs, do you, at all? Other than, like, some people say there's like a hum, a low hum, that sort of thing. Have you come across any cases that I'm unaware of where that sort of like big sound has happened?
No, I wasn't. I mean, there's mysterious sounds, but they weren't like this mysterious sound.
Yeah, very, very
People
odd.
just parked across the country, and I could tell where it was by the newspaper articles, because people were used to sonic booms and didn't even think about it, but people were calling the police and all kinds of authorities about this. So I have no idea what it was, but it was something that definitely happened.
Mm. Do you, is the Pascagoula case one of the best cases out there to your mind?
Yeah, to my mind, of course, I may be prejudiced,
Of course, you're highly biased.
but I think it's the best documented of anything. At that time, they had the sheriff's office said that they had around 50 people calling in on that night reporting something odd, which is just unheard of. And then also there were people on the other side of the river that later figured out they may have been abducted too. So it may have included two abductions that were separate, which is unheard of anywhere. And then also sometime later, in almost the same place and not too distant in time, there was a underwater UFO at USO.
Yeah, yeah, that's been reported. Interesting. Knowing the insides and outsides of this case, what conclusions do you personally draw about the whole alien UFO phenomenon? What is it? What are they? And what are we in this whole scenario?
Well, the whole scenario, I think that we're pretty stupid to throw away the data, because in science, you shouldn't go by what your theory is. You should go by the observations. And with UFOs, we have observations that aren't anything like our theories. I mean, like our theories are you can't go that fast and you can't go through walls and all that. Well, and that gravity pulls everything down. And with those, there's no gravity. They levitate around, things like that. So they just throw everything away and say that this didn't happen. Well, there's observations that it did. And so instead of tossing all the information away and saying, you know, calling people crazy and all that. They need to, if science evolves and gets intelligent, it needs to uh, capture and study the observations instead of throwing out everything that's against their theory.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, we're not going to learn anything if we just throw away the data.
I completely agree with you on the scientific approach to this subject, but what would you say that the UFOs and aliens are? Have you pondered that and then wondered how we fit into this whole narrative?
Well, here's my last book, Aliens and Apocalypse.
Yeah, Lush.
Meaning with alien messages. And I was saying a number of things. One thing I was saying is that the aliens, when we send astronauts someplace, they're big men with big spacesuits and gas masks and everything, well protected. And oftentimes, if one of our cultures takes over a culture that isn't developed, that they, take everything and wipe out and use people for slaves and have the conquistador idea. And that, we're like if War of the Worlds, we're thinking that could happen to us if we meet aliens. Instead, what our aliens seem to look like in the media is like females or young kids. They're smaller than us. They're skinny. They don't have big muscles. They're not wearing even clothes. We have all this protection. And I was saying that maybe one of the messages might be that we should pay more attention to our females here. And if they're putting that in as a message, instead of having our conquistador philosophy of, everything, because right now we're at the stage where we can blow up the world and we can all kill ourselves. And that's a stupid thing to do. But we're doing it because we think we're conquistadors with the big alpha male that conquers everything and takes everything. And we solve our problems by making worse problems. I mean, one of our problems is violence, and we're making more violence. And so I was saying that I was just going through a lot of things that people don't know about females in my book.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was about actual like messages or whatever that the aliens had given to people. So yours is a different approach then.
I was talking about formal messages that aliens are giving to people, but I was also talking about the symbology. And the symbology is that, and the messages too are to be peaceful and cooperative.
That's true, yeah.
And it's just the opposite the way we are. And so I was saying a lot of things about females that aren't in the literature at all. And for example, only the female passes life to the next generation. And I was saying that, which is true, but it's not anything anybody knows. And
how do you mean? Sorry.
Earth life is made of cells. Well, only the female passes a cell to the next generation, the egg cell. When males reproduce, they give DNA and that's it. But
Okay.
the egg cell is alive. The DNA doesn't come alive unless it's in the egg cell. And that's sort of the opposite. I mean, in our male culture, we are taught that the male does everything, creates everything. Actually, the female does, if you look at biology. And I was mentioning that females pass life to the next generation, only females do. And therefore, males compete for females. And they usually, like survival of the fittest, they show, these males out competing, and the one with the biggest antlers wins, and he's the one that reproduces and the other one's dead and everything like that. Well, that's not, it leaves out the whole main idea of the males. The whole idea of evolution is to get males with big antlers, because the males are contesting for the females, and they always leave out what the females do. So you never know why the males are, fighting and goring each other and everything over the females. Well, they leave out what the females do, and that is the females not only mate, but they also nurse the young. They go through pregnancy, birth, and then they often raise the young. And that's left out, but that's a lot more important to the evolution and survival than the males with their big antlers. And I was just saying a lot of things like that that are left out of our literature. And so we think, the big male with a weapon is the height of evolution and the conqueror and everything. And so we have all these stupid wars and everything. And that's not based on reality.
So how are you extrapolating this into the alien type side of things? Where does that reality fit into the alien picture?
Well, a lot of the messages from aliens are, they're not saying make bigger weapons and kill everybody. They're saying peaceful things like take care of the earth and get along.
True.
Well, the female model in the animal kingdom actually is to be cooperative. I mean, the males are out fighting, but the females get along, and like a lion pride, it was always presented as a male in his harem, and he collected these females. Like, they have new science now, and lion pride is a group of related females who are the permanent members, the leaders, and everything else. And the male is temporary. I mean, male may last 2 years, and another male comes in, wipes him out. And so I was saying that the basic idea of the male conquistador and the harem and everything isn't bearing out on science, and that probably humans form the same way with groups of females, and there's a lot of evidence of that. Such as all the earliest art and everything is mainly females, and that what females developed was the ability to think in symbols, and that's probably what made us successful, rather than males going around with weapons and everything. I was saying that our history may be a lot different than what we think it is, and that we're making these big weapons and everything, that using all kinds of energy and resources and everything to kill ourselves, and we're basing it on something that's not right. And so I was thinking maybe in several ways the aliens are telling us to, examine ourselves and look into why we're doing things.
Oh, I see. So your book is going down the route of, we're following this path, but either we should be following a different path, or they're trying to guide it. Aliens are trying to guide us down a different path. Is that right?
Yeah, not clobbering us over the head with it, but just giving us little images of maybe we should rethink what we're doing.
Okay. This is the first time I've heard of this type of thing linked with the alien phenomenon. So well played for you for coming up with it. How has that gone down, that thought process?
Well, I expected a whole lot of antagonism and everything, but it happened to come out at exactly the same time as a female is now running for the president of the United States. And I'm not getting nearly as much flack as I expected, because
I thought that when you said it, I thought, hey, this is going to be going down the wrong route, isn't it? For people, I mean. Wow.
And so, I was saying that I think it's a little bit more accepted for a female, like, just no time at all ago, females were wearing, shackles and presented as the root of all evil and original sin and stupid and everything else, which, and in different religions, the male is always presented as the deity and the life giver and the creator and all that. And I think they're saying that maybe we should look into our own history and our own science and discover what we're like and what Earth's like, instead of being the way we are now.
Have you got any examples where aliens, or stories like that, where aliens are sort of guiding us towards that? Have you got any bits of evidence that you could say this links with your theory?
Well, I was saying several things, and like for instance, there was the Fatima example.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There was these shepherd kids, and they saw, first of all, they saw this man that was shining and everything, and he said they told them they were going to be eventually finding out something. Well, every 13th of the month for the next months, they would see something. And at first, nobody believed them, told them they were crazy and this couldn't happen and all. And then each month, there were more people that came to watch. And finally, at the end, the last month, there was this big show. And this was back during World War I, way before UFOs or anything like that, where finally this big crowd came, and this woman came down, and you always say the deity is a male. Well, this woman came down and gave some prophecies like that the World War I is going to end, and there will be more in the next World War, and gave some other prophecies. And also, it was raining when it happened. And then it said the sun came down and gave out all this warmth and dried everybody's clothes and went back up. And this was a miracle. And vast number of people saw the thing and reported it was in the papers and everything. And so she gave prophecies and things like that, about the next war and things like that,
Knowing that you looked into that Fatima thing, what was the third prophecy, by the way? Because it was apparently written on a piece of paper, wasn't it?
I don't know, because there's a lot of flick flack about what it was, and they said only the Vatican knows and all that, and so there's a lot of speculation that maybe there's going to be a big, horrible turmoil, and then people will change and things will be better, but something horrible is going to happen in the future.
Yeah, I've heard. It's obviously we've had many prophecies down the years, haven't we, of things going wrong, and then those dates come and pass, and nothing happens, right? But I know with that Fatima one, it's meant the other prophecies were meant to have come true, and then the Vatican did hide that third message. Have you heard of that scenario where, like, someone's mentioning a date like 2030, 2032, that sort of time, where something apparently is coming? Do you think that's what that Fatima prophecy is?
Well, I think a lot of them are, there's a lot of prophecies, and they've always had the end of the world, and it's always been concerning something else, like maybe a meteor will come down and clobber us, or volcanoes will go off and kill everybody. But in this case now, we can do it to ourselves, and our own aggression might be our own threat to us. And maybe that's what they're saying, that, we'd better watch out because we might be the ones doing it.
Yeah. And I wouldn't put it past us either, are we? Because we are stupid, like you said earlier. A very stupid bunch of people. God damn it. So that's your latest book. I'll link to your books within the description to this video. So anyone who's interested, I suggest you go and check them out anyway. Philip gives you high praise for the work you did with him with the Pascagoula. So well played on that. And I'll link to your socials as well. But before we wrap up, I do want to ask you some random questions and take you into the Koit Zone. Koit Zone! So in the Koit Zone, I'm just going to ask you strange questions. You can answer best you see fit. So let's start with, what is your favourite piece of music or song?
I guess I don't know too much about music. I think Song of India is kind of pretty. I mean, it's way back, but it's just a beautiful song. In Finlandia, and I don't know, just ones like that.
I'll look that up because I genuinely don't know Song of India, so I will look it up after this. What food or sweets item are your writing friends? So what do you munch on while you write?
I try to eat healthy things, but I have a tendency to eat chocolate.
Good choice, yeah. And what is your chocolate of choice?
Anything chocolate, with lots of chocolate.
Whatever you can grab and move towards your mouth. Yeah.
A hot fudge sundae every day at noon. It's not healthy, but I tell myself it has ice cream, so Anyways, chocolate's supposed to be a little bit healthy.
Exactly. That's my excuse. What was the last film or movie in this case that you saw at a cinema?
Oh, it was I probably shouldn't say this was a terrible movie. I forget the name of it. It was Ghostbusters, or the latest
Oh,
Ghostbusters.
the Frozen Empire one, the very last one.
Yeah, the one with the little doughboys that were running around.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. Not that
I didn't
great.
think it.
No, that's fair. I saw it myself not long back. I didn't think it was that great. The first one of the new lot was better, I thought. What is the worst sound in the world?
The worst sound?
Yeah.
Throwing up.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I hate it when my girlfriend does that. Obviously, when she's sick, and I should have more empathy when she's ill and stuff. But I have to put earplugs in because I can't deal with it. Good choice. What's your best athletic achievement?
Staying alive. Walking. I'm not real athletic. I'm the last person anybody would ever choose for a team. If somebody says sport, I go in a coma.
So, were you ever athletic, even in days
But
gone by?
I can walk up 12 flights of stairs nonstop and things like that. So, but I'm not good at competition. I'm terrible at competing. I just stand there and let the balls hit me, and everybody.
You were crap at dodgeball then, weren't you, at school?
Wasn't good.
Are you skilled in any form of performance, like singing, dancing, or anything like that?
I used to be real good at whistling, and then suddenly I stopped being good. I can't whistle at all now. And I blame my dentist. And I took this up with him. He said he never heard of anybody losing their ability.
It is strange, unless you lost some teeth or anything. That shouldn't happen, should it?
No. And he worked on me, and then I no longer could whistle. And I used to just whistle all the time. So I really miss whistling, but I don't know if I can't. I think it was my tooth work, though.
I'm going to say something now that's kind of weird, but it's in similar vein to what you mentioned. Do you ever remember as a kid, you used to be able to do this with your armpit and go, make the
The
armpit
boys
sounds?
used to get that in our class.
Yeah, I haven't been able to do that for years. I think I know what it is. It's probably just armpit hair, but stopping the pocket of air. But you've just reminded me of that, so thank you. Does reincarnation exist? And if so, what or who are you coming back as?
Oh, let me think. Well, I might like to come back as an alien,
What
and then
sort?
I'll know why they're here. Um, no, well, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, so I can't tell. I just tell in the past. I want to come back in the future. So, um, a future where it's all golden and everything's wonderful, but people still learn. And you learn from hardship, so there's still some hardship down there too.
That's the thing with life, isn't it? Unless there's struggle, there's no growth. If
That's right.
everything's solved, then in theory life is boring.
Yeah. It's like paradise and heaven, but what do you learn in paradise and heaven? You just float around and have a
Exactly,
halo.
nothing. Yeah. I was saying this to Tiff the other day with my girlfriend. Is this now heaven that we're living now? It's a heaven. And then when we decide to go back down to, well, call it the real Earth, that could be even worse than this. That's an
Well, we could
interesting
make
thought.
heaven ourselves. I mean, Earth is beautiful, has all this life and everything, and we're killing it. We're killing each other. And there's no sense in it.
Belinda
I mean,
Carlisle was right all along, wasn't she? Heaven is a place on earth.
yeah, it is.
I agree. I agree. It pains me no end when we go outside and I see people throwing rubbish on the floor. Every day we pick it up and I think, what are you doing? Silly
Look
sausages.
at all these other planets. There's nothing, and we have all these trees and every kind of life you can imagine and everything. It's so beautiful. You don't know what the planets throughout the universe are like, but this one's pretty good.
It is pretty good because we could live here for a start, so that's always a win. What is the most money you've ever found?
I found $1 yesterday.
Oh, good. Is that the highest value of money you found?
Let me think. Um, I think I found more than that uh, in my drawers. Things that
That doesn't count. That's yours already to begin with. I mean, like in the wild, so you like found a $20 note or something.
I suppose I found things, but if I do find things, I usually try to give them back to people. I mean, I found like purses along the road because I used to jog, and I would call people up and say, I found your purse. And I would go great trouble to find the person. And sometimes they would come and act like I stole it from them. Nobody ever gets a reward. Um, my uh, brother-in-law went through these unclaimed funds, and he found a bunch of money that I didn't know about and things like that. And he didn't take any. And I thought I should give him a full lot for
Hmm.
finding it.
Well done for you for being honest and actually calling people up. Did you sometimes call them and say, I found your purse, but there's no money in there? But I've got a new car.
Yeah, that's what I should have done because people seemed suspicious. They didn't say, well, we'll reward you. They just came and like, I'd just stolen it from them or something.
That's weird. I don't know. Where's the thanks gone in our life? Do you have a favorite item of clothing?
Uh, Pockets in everything, whatever I'm wearing. I like a lot of pockets.
Is that to store all your stolen purses?
Yeah.
What food? I think I know the answer. What food is your downfall? Is it still chocolate?
Yeah, but I like blueberries and other things too.
Okay, but you can't really overkill on blueberries, can you?
No, I guess not. But they're pretty
Fair
good.
enough. Will is the last question in the Koit zone. Will we ever get to that Star Trek future where we exist past our solar system limits in a federation sort of thing?
I sure hope we do. That's why I'm writing my book is instead of killing ourselves, we should be out, exploring the universe and everything with the same amount of time and effort we spend making weapons and killing each other. We could have been out in the universe centuries ago.
I kind of want to leave on this note because you've left on the hope aspect of things, which is good, and we should be leaving on a positive note. But I kind of want to ask you this question. If you had to put your money on it, and I know money means nothing, it's irrelevant, but a gentleman's bet, are we going to survive as a species or are we going to kill ourselves?
Well, I have hope. Um, that's why I'm writing my book is I was sort of saying it's stupid to kill ourselves. It's not really how we evolved.
Yeah, so you're going to go with the positive will live.
I hope so.
I'm with you. I also hope so. Okay, that is the end of the Koit zone. So thank you for going through that with me, which leaves the final two questions we ask everyone. First is, what else do you like to do in your downtime? Any activities or guilty pleasures?
Oh, well, one of them is I live on a farm with a beautiful, beautiful woods, and I go out there all the time and observe everything and identify everything and everything. I'm just amazed at all the life you can find right here in our little tiny spot. And I also write about history, and my farm has been in the family ever since about 1803,
That's your
generations.
barn, isn't it? I saw a picture of your barn with the big Ohio sign on it.
Yeah, it's now a park, and we sold the farm to a park, although we're still living on it. And so it just tiny little spot in the middle of nowhere has a real big history. And I've written books about that too, about all the people on the farm and what they did and have letters and everything. So pretty cool. Just
Yeah, very cool.
a little chunk of earth is really interesting.
Yeah, I imagine if you looked at any small, let's just say a kilometer square piece of land, I bet you could find great stories about a lot of those kilometer squares of land, couldn't you?
You
Especially in
could,
our
yeah.
countries, yeah. Amazing. And that leaves us to our final question. Is there anything you're currently working on?
I've been working on um, studying quantum mechanics and thinking my own thoughts and doing my own interpretation of how things work. And I'm taking courses in it and that sort of thing.
Here's an interesting one with that, because I was speaking to Steve about this, Steve Mera, a few weeks ago. If quantum entanglement is a real phenomenon, right, and it's theorized that it is, does that mean there's another you out there entangled to you right now? So what you do here, that person does there.
I suppose it could be. I mean, it seems highly improbable, but probability could include infinite numbers of infinite anything. So I suppose so.
It's
There
just
might
a
be an
nice thought.
animator too.
Yeah, it could just be you're over there, but instead of wearing, I think that's a blue top you've got on now, you could be wearing a red one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, random. Irena, thank you ever so much for your time. It's much appreciated. We covered a lot of ground there. So yeah, like I said to everyone earlier, check out links in the descriptions to Irena's books and socials. Thank you ever so much for coming on. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. I just saw you interviewing other people right before I
Oh, did you?
looked at
Who did you see?
Denise Stoner.
Oh, yeah, I had a good time with Denise. Yeah,
Yeah.
she come up with some frightening stuff though,
Oh, I
especially
didn't
that
see
soul
the
thing, you know.
Oh, I didn't see the whole thing. I just saw the beginning. Then I realized it was time to
And
come on.
time to get on, yeah. Well, there's a story, I think it's about an hour in, where she says about the aliens dropping souls into people and saying what we're just containers and stuff. That's kind of freaky, but hey ho.
It
There
could
we
be
go.
though.
Yeah,
No.
could be. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. See you on the next one.